Florida was able to beat the projections in 2024. How about 2025? We're going to give you a very early projected record for this Florida team. And before we get to 2025, let's look back at the last 4 seasons. You can see our projection compared to their actual record. So in 2021, projected to go 9-3, they went 6-6. In 2022, projected to go 7-5, they went 6-6. And then in 23, projected to go 6-6, they went 5-7. So they were under the projections every single year until last year, 2024, projected to go just 5-7. They went 7-5, so they beat the projections by 2 games. Big part of that was like some of the teams on the schedule turned out to be not quite as good as we expected or projected. But do keep in mind, these are not predictions. We don't do predictions until well after spring football, of course. This is just a very early projection based off of our way too early tier rankings. So we're talking about the tier rankings that we did that are really just based off of last season, and then we moved teams up or down one tier or left them in the same tier based off of how much production, how many players they have coming back, what they added in the transfer portal, all of that. And Florida is a tier 2 team in our tier ranking. So here is the schedule. And again, Florida is a tier 2 team. You look at the scale that we use. So that means if Florida plays a tier 3 team, then that means they would have a 61 to 70% chance to win that game. However, if that game is on the road, then it drops to a 50-50 game. So that's kind of the way this works. We start with the easier wins for Florida. I think you've got 2 of them. Actually, no, we've actually got 4 of them. So you've got LIU, USF, Mississippi State, and Florida State. So again, I mentioned that this is based off of the tier rankings, which are based off of last season, and we were only able to move teams up or down one tier. And Florida State was in the very bottom tier of the Power 4 last year. So they were only able to move up one spot, and that was still enough for Florida, for that game to be in the green. Now, do I think they have over an 80% chance to beat Florida State? No, I don't, because I think Florida State's going to be a lot better. And that's why this is not, these are not personal predictions. It's just based off of our formula. So again, the formula says that is a win, a game in the green. Mississippi State, I think I feel like Florida has a better chance to beat them than Florida State. That one I would probably put over 80%. Florida State, I'd probably put, 70 to 80. I'd probably put it in the blue. But again, we use the same formula for every team, and that's where it comes out. So you got 4 wins there. Those games will be counted as wins when we do average all this out. You've got Kentucky in the blue. That game is on the road, so that one could be a little bit tricky. But again, they are high enough ahead of Kentucky in the tier rankings to where that game comes out as a 71 to 80% game. So we've really only got one game where Florida is going to be, I think, an underdog. They'll be an underdog probably in a few games, but I think like a clear underdog in a game that's going to be really tough for them. But it is a rivalry game. They played them tough last year, and that's Georgia on November 1st. And again, this is all based off of our tier rankings. Georgia is in tier 1, Florida is in tier 2. Texas is also in tier 1, but that game is in Gainesville. That's why that game is not in the yellow. It's actually going to be in the white, and that's where the rest of these games are. So half the schedule here, it's 50-50 games. You got LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. So LSU is also a tier 2 team. Miami also in tier 2. Texas is in tier 1, but that game is at home, so that's why it's in the white. Texas A&M, tier 2 team. Ole Miss, tier 2 team. Tennessee, tier 2 team. So you've got a bunch of games against evenly matched opponents, and that's half the schedule. Half the schedule is there, and I think Georgia's more of a 50-50 game. Again, neutral site. I think the gap, we saw it last year. Florida played Georgia really close. Georgia's not quite as good as we've seen in the past. Florida's on the rise. I would personally put that one in the 50-50 range, and then I would probably put Florida State in the blue if I was just kind of mapping out these numbers. But again, this is the way it comes out in our formula. So what's the projection with this formula? Well, it's pretty good, 8-4 for Florida. So a little bit better than last year. Again, you have 4 wins, and that will leave you with 8 games. And if they split those 8 games, if they split these 50-50 games, and we throw Georgia and we throw Kentucky in there, they split those games, that's how they can get to 8-4. And I think that's very realistic. It could go the other way. If they lose a lot of close games to evenly matched opponents, obviously they could have a pretty bad season. It could be a 6-6, 5-7 type season. But if they're able to win a lot of close games, able to knock off, let's say, Texas and Georgia, Florida is absolutely a playoff contender, and they could get to 10-2 or and get into the college football playoff. So I think that's a real possibility. The schedule is tough again, but I think it gives them a shot. There are enough winnable games on this schedule where they've got a shot to get to the college football playoff. But again, it's going to be very tough. And again, our projection 8-4 for Florida in 2025.